Our favorite customers look at it much more about like the end quality to the consumer that they can deliver. If you deliver something really amazing, so if you're an e-commerce brand and you're always in stock and you get it to them early and you find ways to not have to charge them a lot for shipping, if you have like a really high quality product that just doesn't have defects or anything, you're going to cultivate really strong, loyal customers who pay you more and ultimately drive your profitability through selling more, having a better brand reputation, and having really loyal, exciting customers.
Welcome to Blue Ocean by StartOps. Each episode, I sit down with leaders in consumer brand supply chain, finance, and CX to talk about the problems they're facing and the solutions they're using or building. I hope you enjoy the show. Hi, everyone. I'm Charles Cushing, the founder of StartOps. With me here today is Alex Yaseen, founder and CEO of Parabola. Welcome, Alex.
How's it going? Great to be here.
So just to kick off, do you mind just sharing like a brief self-intro and the one-liner of what Parabola does, just for anyone who's listening who doesn't know?
I've been working on Parabola for about 7 years now. I've always kind of had a foot in both worlds of really liking technology and working a lot with technology and feeling very empowered working with technology. And also most of my friends, most of my family have definitely not had that experience and usually experience like working with technology as a lack of agency. They have to fight with their computer, try to get their browser to not take them to some weird place so like that, have their computer like fighting against them. And I've always really enjoyed helping explain to people how they can work with technology better, use it as a tool to help them get more done, as opposed to feeling like they have to fight it along the way. I worked in strategy consulting for a little bit to see what kind of that world looks like. Because of my technical background, I ended up getting stuck doing a ton of way in the weeds data analysis, business case modeling, other just like really working with a lot of data. And I got to know a lot of really interesting subject matter experts from across a few different businesses, a lot of them some scaled CPG brands that had a lot of complexity to supply chains and operations and also other aspects of their business. The people who have the really in the weeds subject matter expertise, they've accrued over decades. That should be like the really hard thing in the world. And figuring out what to do with that, figuring out how to like do a data analysis, create an automation, take some sort of action in the world. I got quite excited about what would it be like to help build tooling that helps somebody who has that really hard-won subject matter expertise be able to action it in a much better way. So Parabola is designed to be usable by anybody who can basically explain something in relatively plain words, how you would onboard a junior person to your team to do something working with data. So our users are usually replacing really manual spreadsheet processes where somebody is copying and pasting and doing a lot of find and replaces, downloading from 3 different portals, pulling in from Shopify, whatever, has to do a 3PL, doing a whole bunch of like where all the like complex data exists, mixing that all together, building reports in transit inventory tracking, inventory reconciliation, freight audits, whatever the type of in the weeds work. We particularly like to focus on places where there isn't a really good solution today. So use cases that are super bespoke, so companies can't just buy off-the-shelf software, quite complex, so you can't use a really simple, lightweight automation tool or maybe like a legacy tool that you're currently using. And then they change really frequently. The requirements change regularly. And so even if you have a whole bunch of software engineers sitting around on your team, which you probably don't, but even if you did, code isn't the right medium to solve these problems because you need the person who's the subject matter expert to constantly tinker and tweak these types of processes. So we are attempting to be a solution for those people.
The companies that sort of come before, right, there was like RPA, BPA, to some extent, like maybe some iPaaS tools for like working on this stuff. If this, then that, Zapier. You guys come in, you have like this interesting angle on maybe unstructured data. Generally speaking, though, when a leader at a business is looking to make an investment in this kind of tool, what are the KPIs that they're trying to improve or hit? Like, is it about labor cost saving? Is it about error reduction? What are the things that like get people out of bed to want to automate something from a business perspective?
When we're initially talking with companies, sometimes certainly like cost reduction comes up, and especially right now, I think commerce companies, CPG brands in general, increasingly being held to efficiency metrics and being able to like really talk about margin and be profitable businesses. The world hasn't gotten any simpler. Supply chains are very expensive. Like freight has gone up recently. So there's only so many places you can get some of those cost savings. So cost savings is definitely top of mind for people. Our customers who are like our favorite customers and who I think are the most like, philosophically aligned with us, look at it much more about like the end like quality to the consumer that they can deliver. If you're a brand's like, freight and logistics partner, the end quality that you deliver ultimately is informed a little bit by how much it costs. If you can make it more affordable, you can over-deliver an experience. But also if you deliver something really amazing, so if you're an e-commerce brand and you're always in stock and you get it to them early and you find ways to not have to charge them a lot for shipping, if you have like a really high quality product that just doesn't have defects or anything, you're going to cultivate really strong, loyal customers who pay you more and ultimately drive your profitability through selling more, having a better brand reputation, and having really loyal, exciting customers. And so there's a little bit of both, but we really love when people are thinking about how do we take the 1,000 ideas we've always wished we had the time to pursue that would help our customers have a better experience and actually start delivering on those things now without having to hire the correspondingly people onto our team.
Just in terms of what you see in terms of your own sales process, how much of it is like bottom up? Oh, hey, like IC discovers this tool, they start putting it to work within their company. All of a sudden, the whole team's using it. You can sort of have like a company-wide account versus something more top-down. Like, is there anything you can share about how that evolves?
We intentionally designed it to be a little bit of both. The top-down CFO or COO or director of one of the ops teams has a goal that they're trying to achieve. There's metrics they're trying to drive. Maybe it's a cost saving, maybe it's accelerating revenue. And they're having a mandate from somebody like that to understand, like, here's the direction that we can help this company most focus on the things that matter to them this year is really helpful. But if we're only working with somebody like that, the use cases they're aware of are the high level, broad sweeping, maybe like data infrastructure things. And there's a lot of in the weeds analyst on the team who actually somewhere along the way has to combine those spreadsheets together and like message a vendor and make it all actually work. Only that person really knows the ins and outs of the way they do something today. And also only that person knows all of the 1,000 best ideas that I was just talking about of like how else they could do something. They're the ones with the vendor relationships. They know what crazy workarounds they have to do, the like kind of shadow SOP that they have that they follow that's not actually written in their like actual SOP. And so it's important to engage those people as well. And so we want to have a mandate for this is how we're going to help this company like move their top goals, and also have end users who love using us, who are able to change some of their relationship with work along the way by like actually getting those ideas out to the world.
That's a wonderful way of putting it. Yeah. It's like when your job is just cutting and pasting things out of spreadsheets, it's a lot harder to get excited versus just like getting to think about how you put it together in a tool.
Yeah, we can also help with job satisfaction and like employee retention. I think we're really doing our job correctly.
Probably started like with a little bit more of a generalist focus, right? And it seems like in the last maybe year or so, you've kind of got all in on supply chain and supply chain operators as a core focus, which isn't to say, you're not also supporting other types of people. But I'm just curious, what was the driver behind that move? Was it you just saw more automation opportunities in that space that weren't being served by their tools? Like structurally, I guess, what led to that decision?
Yeah. If you were using us back in 2020, it sounds like you're maybe using us in some of those kind of somewhat more for fun, personal kind of use cases. We get really excited. I get really excited about creating value for that person who's like building stuff in Parabola. So that end user at a company who's building something, I want them to feel like they have more leverage to like create economic value, to therefore be valued by their companies, to get promoted faster, to be a bigger part of the future. And that requires working on use cases that are core to like the value driver of a company. And so we are uniquely good in the world at handling the really operationally complex use cases, frequently involving unstructured data, and aligning where there's a lot of value. And that happens to be like e-commerce, supply chain specifically. We were also working with freight and logistics companies directly, so like 3PLs and freight forwarders. The dense amount of operational complexity that is also core to the differentiator and value driver of a company is really exciting to me, because like that's like the thing we do best, and it's also so valuable and useful for both those individuals and their companies. So we think of ourselves as horizontally applicable. We have users from other industries as well, but we just really love these like operationally complex, super in the weeds use cases.
Okay, so let's zoom in like a level further, because you've built this really interesting, robust product, and I want to just hear a little bit more about how you did it, and then go into some of the specific use cases and how people are using it today. I guess for me, from the outside, it seems obvious that building a tool like this has got to be really hard. I mean, just picking all the different integrations you have to do, the data architecture that you're going to use, the right level of abstraction to show users, like all these things from a product perspective just seem daunting. I guess what would you say, looking back on the history of the company, like what have been the hardest things to do or pull off?
Based on everything we've just been talking about, the end user who we really want to empower, that's been a strong belief of ours from the beginning. And to get that person excited to use us, capable of using us, not feeling like they're having to invest too much speculative time into doing it, but actually able to like pretty quickly see a return on the time they're putting in. And also like they're probably a person who uses spreadsheets, but they don't love the super advanced Excel, Google Sheets formulas. They're mostly using a spreadsheet with the like manual copying and pasting and deleting. So we had to really hit the right balance of very powerful to handle the complexity of these like very in the weeds use cases, while also approachable to that person who isn't an Excel power user, but has that subject matter expertise. And the goal is if you have that subject matter expertise, you can onboard, a new analyst onto your team and tell them how to follow a process. That same way you onboard that person should be the way you use our tool. So yeah, that required building Parabola in a kind of like on hard mode. We absorbed a lot of upfront pain building a tool in that type of a way because there isn't anything else that really exists. Parabola looks like a flowchart for anybody who hasn't seen it. Each one of the steps in that flowchart is either pulling in data, transforming it, operating on data, or taking an action. Each of those things you describe in essentially plain language with dropdowns and buttons. And it's built at a level of abstraction that should feel like first I pull in this data set and then I delete these columns and I do a find and replace and then I combine these two data sets based on the skew. So we had to build a very custom calculation engine and like a language basically that does all this. That took us a while. That was a technically complex thing to do. We were able to, I think, get to some like really amazing customers. So we work with some smaller brands that are up and coming. We work with some brands that are kind of hit their stride pretty widely known in the world, from like Brooklyn and Hexclad and Caraway to Peloton and Sonos and some larger brands. And then we work with some of the like really demanding Flexport and Uber Freight are big customers of ours. Most of the things I described are true in a non-AI world. As large language models have gotten increasingly good, especially at handling unstructured data, we're able to take advances of large language models and combine those with this like really easy to document, easy to talk about syntax that we've created in Parabola so that a subject matter expert can get that subject matter expertise out of their head into Parabola and then use that to instruct a large language model and help it know what to do in a way that it would never have been trained on doing.
This may be a good segue. I want to come back to, just some of the sort of general types of problems that you can solve. Maybe talking about what are some of the specific use cases, or maybe even just picking one sort of step-by-step case study of like what is now possible with the LLM capabilities built into the app.
One of the things we're seeing supply chain teams worry a lot about right now is freight costs. Freight costs have recently gone up. COOs and CFOs are calling in supply chain teams, so a business review to look at where money is being spent. And so a lot of our customers are putting a lot more emphasis on their like inbound freight audits, or at least in like managing inbound logistics, combining a few different freight providers together into like one unified view. Where does all my stuff and how much am I paying for it to move it around the world? Parabola helps do it. So the non-AI part would be if I'm pulling in data from Shopify or NetSuite or somewhere that already has structured, clear data. I did an API to access it, and I know it's going to come back in a really consistent form. We have connectors for those tools. We make it really easy to pull data into Parabola, and you get to see it in what looks like a spreadsheet, but it's constantly updating live. You also probably are getting one of your 3PLs is sending you a CSV file that isn't always perfectly structured the same way, and sometimes columns are named different things, but generally you can kind of pull it in. And then other people are sending you a PDF or maybe like an image of a invoice from a truck driver's like seat next to them with like other stuff in the frame. We see some crazy things. And you need to get that data in to work with it as well. And you don't want to just like manually type it in. So for the CSV file that's from a 3PL that's not always consistently structured, we can pull that in as CSV data. It still looks like a spreadsheet. And then we have some AI-based tools that help you clean that up in a way where you're saying, I always expect columns that are about this structure, and it can handle some of the subjectivity of like, oh, well, they changed the name a tiny bit, but we actually know that that's the same name. So like simple cleanups are easy. And then we also have some really awesome document parsers that can take that crazy photo of an invoice, like from a truck driver's seat. It can scrape all of the text out of it with an OCR model, which is optical character recognition, which is kind of like an older technology, and then can also pass it through a vision-based large language model, which is very cutting-edge technology, and use those two things together to both anchor the large language model in reality so that it doesn't hallucinate and make things up, which is one of the issues with AI today. So we have ways to help you avoid that. And also can still benefit from being able to detect, oh, like I know that post-it note that was off on the corner of like the driver's seat is not a thing we're paying attention to, but like the core invoice and like exactly where the metadata is somewhere on that page is the information I want to pull in, and then convert that into a little spreadsheet that you can mix and match with Shopify and NetSuite and stuff coming from two of your freight forwarders. You might not even know that what you need is AI. You just know that you have this document that comes in and you don't want to have to like transcribe it manually all the time. Or every time your supplier sends you this like CSV file, the product descriptions are slightly different. And sometimes it says t-shirt with a dash, and sometimes it says t-shirt without it. But like those mean the same thing to a human. And so we actually were building a lot of our calculation with AI without having the user to even know that that's what they're doing. It just can kind of magically do the thing that they told it to do. And you can say, hey, I always want to know, is this a shirt or a pair of pants, and like it's gonna figure it out for you. And it just so happens just leveraging some like really cutting edge large language models behind the scenes. I think that's kind of the direction that all of this is going, and that the most natural way for people to interact with each other is just talking to each other or just sending each other emails. And software in general, relationships between companies, I think if they can increasingly get to just, it actually just feels kind of like you just say what you need it to do, or you send an email back and forth to somebody and rely on the technology to figure out the best way to answer that instruction. I think that will end up working the best. And it's kind of how we already know how to deal with like other people. So that's kind of what we're trying to replicate with Parabola.
This is a little bit off the wall, but I've asked a couple other people. I mean, to the extent that many of those emails are somewhat transactional in nature to begin with, I mean, do you see a world where actually that conversation doesn't have to be happening between humans at all, and it can just be a little bit more point to point?
I don't think that's off the wall at all. And that happens today at pretty substantial scale across a few of our customers. APIs exist, and when they're like really perfectly made and documented really well, they work. And in the like tech world, if you're a SaaS company working with other SaaS companies, like you could actually maybe rely on that being the case. Schemas are all correct and the documentation's correct, and there's a whole team of engineers making sure that it's always nothing's ever messing up. In the like e-commerce and supply chain world, that's like almost laughably not the case. Like if an API even exists, it's not documented. It returns different data all the time. Somebody ships a breaking change, all your code breaks. And much more often, people are just transacting in emails and documents back and forth. And that is kind of still an API, right? Like I email you and you do some work and you email me back. That's like still a agreement that like work is going to happen. We transact. It's just not structured data. And so if you're able to take the same thing a human can do in their head and say like, oh, I know what this email means. If you're able to have a computer be able to do that, it's actually a much more natural interface.
That's cool. I assume you guys have email integrations as part of your product.
Without going too into the weeds on how Parabola works, I guess we give every Parabola flow a dedicated email address. Anything that gets sent to that address or auto-forwarded or CC'd gets parsed basically with a few of these different large language models. And then you're able to work with that data. And on the other side, you can reconstruct an email and send it back to somebody or send a Slack message or a text message or whatever kind of like output method you want.
So you mentioned freight audits kind of as one of the use cases, and you threw a couple other ones out there. And I know it's like a very horizontal tool, and so people are doing everything under the sun. But just in terms of like the types of tasks that a supply chain or e-commerce ops team would be needed to do, is it kind of like even distribution across, everything, or are there like a couple of key use cases you're seeing like a lot of? And then I guess the follow on to that is, are there use cases you're seeing a lot of where maybe someone who's not using Parabola today isn't automating it, but it's actually possible now and they could be?
So this generic answer is like, if you're finding yourself doing something repeatedly in spreadsheets, joining a few different data sets together, something that you keep doing is clearly taking up a lot of your time, certainly a thing you should look at Parabola for. And also, I think even more exciting, the things that you know you would like to do, but there's some sort of tech limitation or time limitation being able to do that. Some specific examples, inbound logistics of either creating some visibility of like just literally reconciling data across multiple freight providers and seeing what's actually in transit at any given time, or auditing those if you get even more specific. There's other types of like inventory reconciliation. If you're selling across multiple channels, you have multiple distribution centers, you have difficulty understanding like where all of your data is. If you never changed your supply chain, maybe eventually you could integrate all of that stuff into NetSuite, and you're trying out a new 3PL, you're adding nodes to your distribution way faster than whoever manages your NetSuite is able to like integrate all that stuff. And you should be moving much faster as a supply chain team. That's a good thing, but you need some sort of tooling to be able to make that better than the only two answers being wait for NetSuite to catch up. And like in spreadsheet world, we see people all the time find crazy disparities of hundreds of thousands of dollars of inventory that they weren't tracking because they forgot to drag a VLOOKUP function all the way down. Kind of like other reasons you might want to use Parabola. I've been talking about unstructured data sets. So when invoices are coming in, PDFs are coming in, just other documents that are hard to deal with, I think like there isn't really a great solution to work with those today. If you're getting upstream involved in commercial invoices, packing lists and things like that, like there's a lot of documents, bills of lading, there's a lot of documents that come there. Talked to a bunch of companies that are talking about either selling omnichannel or fulfilling omnichannel, where they have a website, they have a few stores, they maybe want to start being able to ship from their stores, they want to experiment with what it's like to fulfill in a few different ways. And I've talked to multiple directors of operations recently who've been like, oh, I totally know we should do this, but like that's maybe a thing we'll do in a few years because I just don't know like where I would even get started. We can hopefully help you just like have that not actually be a tech challenge. And a few weeks from now, you could actually be reporting on all of the different pieces of inventory you have across all of those 20 different stores that you want to start trying to fulfill out of.
I don't think I've realized the extent to which scale in one of these companies is often just limited by data. Like you'd think it would be something else. You'd think it would be working capital or, demand or something like that. But actually a shocking amount of the time, it seems like it's just like, we can't handle this because we can't get visibility into it. We can't track it. We can't get, the data into our system of record where it needs to be. We can't close the books on it.
Yeah, it's either data or sometimes companies see it as like a people issue where they're like, we don't have enough people or we don't have the right people or something. But it's actually the same issue in either case. It's just like you don't have clarity and visibility 100%.
How do you handle human in the loop type steps where say, a data process needs to run, but actually there is still something like someone needs to make a decision and then it needs to go back in and continue sort of being automated. When you say documentation, it's like the documentation's for the human trying to understand it or like do things with it. So yeah, just curious how you handle that.
Our use cases are full of those things. One of them is where that human in the loop needs to be. Sometimes an AI can actually do it for you with enough of a success rate as close to 100% as possible that it's actually as accurate or more accurate than actually having a human there. I think there's other places where you want a human from an accountability perspective to be involved, to be able to decide, hey, there's a lot of dollars behind this thing. We're about to like make a big freight purchase or send out a new PO or tell a customer we're out of stock or whatever it is, something that you kind of want somebody whose job it is to be accountable to see it first. And so we're increasingly building in like breakpoints. So people who are already Parabola users may be familiar with building two different flows where you build one flow that handles the first part of that process and then the second part of the flow runs once somebody has approved something.
As an operator, often dreamed about having that as a tool. So glad you guys are building it. Well, I think that's all the time we have for today. So just want to say thank you so much again, Alex, for joining us.
Yeah, great chatting with you.
And thanks to everyone listening. If you want to learn more about Parabola, we will link more information in the show notes. And thanks for joining. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Blue Ocean. Blue Ocean is produced by StartOps, a growing collection of resources for operations leaders at e-commerce brands. A few of the things we built include a growing, vendor-free Slack community for operators to ask their most important questions and get answers from trusted peers, a job board that curates jobs from 1,500 modern brands, a media hub that includes this podcast, as well as articles and templates on a variety of operations topics, and a comprehensive directory of the software and services used by our community members. If you want to learn more, head to startops.network. And to keep up with the latest information from StartOps or catch the most recent episodes of Blue Ocean, follow the StartOps page on LinkedIn or subscribe to our newsletter. Thanks for listening and hope to catch you next episode.